Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. It's time for the C3 stream. Hello, good evening, welcome to the C3 stream everybody. Glad to have you here. Happy Tuesday night. Tea up, you're right Joe Dean, I got my tea. I'm sipping a, let me see, ginger turmeric herbal tea tonight from Trader Joe's. I think Joe and Hallie, if you guys are listening, this is from you guys. Thank you. I am sipping it and loving it. So welcome guys, glad to have you here this evening. Welcome to the C3 stream. It is time to grab a cup of tea and a Bible. Find yourself a comfy spot. We're going to be rocking and rolling in our studies tonight. So yeah, how is everybody this evening? We should do a so I was thinking about you guys earlier today. Here's my question for you. I have an opener question. Get ready to comment if you want. The opener question, because we have studied on Tuesday nights. If you're new to the stream, what we do is we study the Bible together. And we have studied a number of characters, themes, stories, all this sort of stuff. But I've been thinking a lot about characters because last week we studied a lot of David, right? So there's David. We've studied a couple other big characters out there. Joseph, Technicolor Dreamcoat. We spent a lot of time on him. Abraham. You guys remember going back to good old Abe? Abraham. Jacob, we spent time on Jacob too. You remember Jacob and Sons. Jacob the deceiver. Jacob. Isaac's in there too, but you know, even the Bible doesn't talk that much. Well, I mean it does, but I mean, come on. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those are three characters we spent some time on. I don't know, who's your favorite character we've studied so far? Who's your favorite person that you have learned about so far with the current curriculum as we're doing it? We're doing a narrative look through the Bible, right? We started at the beginning. In the beginning. We started at the beginning, and we are taking a narrative look, kind of step by step, story by story, and really a lot of characters, really focusing on a lot of the different characters that are out there, because characters help make up and comprise the biblical story in such significant ways. So, favorite characters, what do you got for me? Who's the favorite person that we have spent time looking at, studying, talking about? Yeah, Moses, he'd be another one. We spent a lot of time on Moses. Joshua, we talked about Joshua. You guys remember Joshua? Who else? Who else? Let me look back at my notes. Yeah, we did. Okay. Oh, here you go. We did this. Oh, okay. I should show you this. You guys remember? Okay, I didn't have it set up, so I didn't have it ready to go. Give me a second. Patience. And push that, and then pull that. Oh, it says pre-recorded. This ain't pre-recorded. It's live. Let me get rid of that. Boom. Ooh. All right, you guys remember this? This was like the Genesis. We spent a lot of time here. Hey, Adam, Seth, Noah. We talked about Noah. Do you guys remember Noah? Moses and David. It's a tie. Okay. Yeah, I mean, talking about huge characters. Moses, the lawgiver. It's generally speaking, that's what Moses is referred to as the lawgiver. Because he gives, supposedly, according to the scriptures, he wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, which is called the Pentateuch, which is referred to as the law in the Jewish tradition. So, you know, and this is some peeps from even before that, but here's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We spent time looking at them. Then, yeah, we did all this stuff. Here's Moses and the 10 Commandments stuff. We did that. That was great. We talked about them wandering in the wilderness. Joshua, that's him blowing the horn. Right? He's blowing the horn as he's walking around Jericho. We talked about him a little bit. Skis. Judges, you know, we talked about some of the judges too. Do you guys remember the judges? We talked about the judges. Yeah, here's judges. There's a whole bunch of, we did Ehud. Do you guys remember Ehud? He was a fun one to kind of talk about Ehud's a judge, where he stabs King Eglon in the stomach. And Eglon's so large, his girth covers the blade. That's a fascinating story. Judges, man. Woo, that's some messy stuff. Okay, we got another vote for Moses. Noah and his crew. Yeah, we spent time. Remember, Noah, kind of sad on the back end of Noah's story, and nobody ever really talks about that. He gets a little. He enjoys his wine, right? You guys remember that? Noah, love it. Yeah, we did all sorts of stuff. We talked about Saul and Samuel. We talked about Samuel a fair amount too. Remember Samuel? He's the last of the judges, and he's the one who tries to talk the people out of. Actually, he's like, you don't want a king. Like, for reals, you don't want a king. Like, nah, we want a king. Yeah, no, you don't want a king. But they chose a king anyway, so they got Saul. That didn't go so well. And then, David. Last week we got David. Oh, yeah, okay, we got some. Jacob and Esau was interesting. Yeah, isn't it, though? I agree, Michelle. The tension between Jacob and Esau, right? Jacob's a fascinating character as a whole because he's just messy as all get out. But he's fascinating maybe in a particular way because you get early Jacob and then you get late Jacob. Like, he's one of the characters that there's a handful of characters that we get them all the way through their whole life, more or less, as opposed to like just the end of their life when they're an adult or even the beginning of their life, right? Jacob, we get a full spectrum. And yeah, the Jacob and Esau thing is just fascinating stuff. Yeah, Trudy. Joshua, because he believed about God and conquering the promised land while the others were afraid, right? Joshua, you remember, guys? You guys remember that? Joshua went into the land with the scouts. He was one of the scouts. And then, yeah, he had to be patient. Like, Joshua is a fascinating character. I really, truly am interested in. I keep telling myself that I'm going to do a deep dive into Joshua someday. For devotional reasons, because I find him absolutely fascinating as someone who learned how to lead well under Moses and saw what Moses went through and the struggles and the challenges and the stiff-necked people. And, Joshua took some risks doing the whole a spying thing, and he came back and he was one of the two people who was like, yeah, come on, God said let's take the land. Joshua's just a fascinating character. And then Moses dies and he takes over. Joshua's been on my mind a lot too because I just finished in my personal devotions Deuteronomy. I was reading through Deuteronomy. So Moses just kicked the bucket and left it to Joshua. So, wow. Love it, guys. Super good. Stephanie, Janice, come join us. Or is it Janice? Is it Janice or Janice? Hallie, I don't know. Come and join us. Either way. Welcome once more to the C3 stream, guys. It's time to get rocking and rolling on our content tonight. What do you say we go ahead and do that? Let's do it. All right, you don't need to see my notes. There we go. I always get so bouncy. That intro music is just so energetic. I mean, I know it's 7:30 at night, 7:40 at night, but I like it. It's bouncy. It gets you going. It gets you ready for the word. So we left off with David and Solomon in the transition from David to Solomon, right? So King David, famous. King David, famous king in ancient Israel. To this modern day, contemporary Israelites, Jews, know of and continue to hold up David as the man, right? I mean, David's the man. So David does eventually die, though, and leaves his kingdom. Which, yeah, I mean, he did a good job expanding it. You know, we spent a lot of time on David because we get a whole bunch of stories around David, conquering general. I mean, you can even see in the map there, he's the guy giving you the googly eyes there. That's David. But then you look at the map, that's ancient Israel, and you can see by the time he dies, the yellow, that's how far he has expanded the kingdom. So he inherited the little purple, the little purple. He started there. And then the north finally recognized him as king as well. 7 years later, they acknowledge him. So he gets the purple and the red. And then he launches all these campaigns and wins a whole lot. And dies, leaving Solomon, his son, with all the yellow and inside. And fascinating side note, really what the big debate is to this very day with the modern day Israel is that most modern day Israel, most Zionists, their intent politically is to reestablish the boundaries of David's kingdom. Like, that's the goal. That's the thought, is like they deserve, they are entitled to what, I don't know. Forgive me, I don't have the greatest word choice to name it particularly so, but the idea is to reestablish the Davidic kingdom and use his historic boundaries as the establishment of the Israeli state. So David did good. He's a big deal. And he leaves all of this to his son Solomon. We pick up in the book First Kings, and that's really what we're doing. We're embarking on the next book. David's story is told in 1st and 2nd Samuel. His death is recorded in 1st Kings, like the beginning, the intro. I was rereading it, guys. We never went into it. It's so funny, but not. You guys want to read it? Oh, it's just so good. Like, I mean, you can just feel it. All right, here we go. Here's King David's death. King David's death is approaching. He gave this charge to his son Solomon. So Solomon is going to take over. There's this whole political thing that goes on between Solomon and his older brother, but Solomon is going to be king. And here's David on his deathbed. This is David on his deathbed speaking to his king, his son. I am going where everyone on earth must someday go. Take courage. Be a man. Observe the requirements of the Lord your God. Follow his ways. Keep the decrees, commands, regulations, and laws written in the law of Moses, that you will be successful in all you do and wherever you go. So, like, this is good stuff, right? I mean, the beginning kind of starter is to be like, be an upstanding guy, and most importantly, be faithful. Be faithful. And if you do this, then the Lord will keep the promise that he made to me. And that's a big deal. We talked about this 2 weeks ago, where God really, I think it was 2 weeks ago, God really made a particular promise into and spoke profoundly in relation to David and the establishment of David's throne, right? So if you do this, if you can follow, if you follow God and remain faithful to the Lord your God, if you do all this stuff and remain faithful to him, God's going to take care of you, God's going to keep the promise that he made to me, to establish my kingdom, to take care of my issue, the children, and, he's going to take care of you. God told me, if your descendants live as they should and follow me faithfully with all their heart and soul, one of them will always sit on the throne of Israel. Now, this line right here on David's deathbed more or less becomes the thematic tension of this entire book of the Bible. That's right. Here, hiding in chapter 2 of 1 Kings, that's where we are, 1 Kings chapter 2, hiding inside of it is really the thematic statement that we find for this entire book of the Bible, 1st and 2nd Kings. 2nd Kings is really just like part 2 of the same book. 1st and 2nd Kings have the same author. It just got so dang big that they decided to split the scrolls in two. All right, so 1st and 2nd Kings, it's the same book. We just, for convenience sake, the editors long ago decided to divide it into two. And this is the tension. If you're going to be a good king, if you're going to have a heart like David, if you follow after David and have a heart like David and worship God the way David worshiped God, and if you follow him faithfully, you will be able to maintain the integrity of the throne. If you don't, bad stuff happens. Spoiler alert, bad stuff happens. All right, he continues. So, it's actually kind of funny because at this point in time, this is where, you would figure he, says this final line and then goes, drifts off peacefully into, you know, he makes this huge statement of faith and then closes his eyes and breathes his last breath, you know. But then all of a sudden he wakes up and he perks up. Oh yeah, wait, no, before I die, there's something else. You know what Joab did that one time? Remember how he murdered some people? Yeah. He pretended that it was war, but it was done in a time of peace. Do with him what you think best, but don't let him grow old in age and go to the grave in peace. Sorry, it's kind of like a maniacal laugh there. Sorry, that just popped out. But like, for reals, I mean, come on. You have this huge faithful statement about being faithful to the Lord your God, and then it is followed up by, oh yeah, kill this guy for me. Right? It's just, oh man, David. Golly, David. And then you would imagine, like, then he dies, but then he realizes, like, well, I guess you can't end on a bad note, can you? Gosh, I really shouldn't end by condemning someone. So, you know, also be kind to these guys, you know. Kill Joab, but make sure you take care of these people. You know, make them permanent guests. They took care of me, you know, so take care of them. And then, once again, you assume, like, he would pass off peacefully. Oh, wait, remember Shimei? Whenever I see this name, I always want to say Shmi. My two little girls at home love, what's the Captain Hook and Shmi? Shmi! What am I thinking of, guys? Shmi. The pirates. Oh, I can't remember the name, but you guys know what I'm talking about. It's not actually Shmi. That's not how you say that, but Shimei, whatever. He says to kill this guy too. You are a wise man, Solomon, and you know how to arrange a bloody death for him. Then David died. Oh man, sorry if I have a dark sense of humor, but I mean, here this incredible king, King David, a faithful, godly man. Boy, he's messy though, and I think that's why I love him so much. That's why I can laugh, is because, you know, the same realities of just silly, stupid stuff we say and do makes its way even into the heroes of the Bible, and that's why they're so awesome. They're so accessible to us. So that's it. David dies. David kicks it. Boom. Game over. He now sleeps faithfully until the day of resurrection. David sleeps. He had reigned over Israel for 40 years, 7 of them in Hebron, that is the south. That's where he establishes kingdom in the south. And then 33 when he moved the capital to Jerusalem. Solomon becomes king. And note this, the kingdom was firmly established. And then it goes into the detail of how Solomon establishes his rule. Now, this next story is actually very interesting and worth noting because it ties back into David and David's story. If you remember, David has a very complicated and messy story, particularly so. He has had a daughter raped, and he has had 3 sons die. And if you remember, and you can pull back on a little thread from the last week, there's this thing about sheep and how David does something very, very ungodly. He does something very, very selfish, and it costs somebody his life. It costs Uriah his life. David kills someone, and when he's confronted by it, he says that, you know, it's told in a story, a parable, and when he's confronted by it, he basically condemns himself fourfold. And so by the time David dies, he has had significant pain and darkness in his life, and specifically 3 deaths thus far. And that's when you get to the next story. One day, Adonijah, who is Solomon's brother, okay? So Adonijah made a claim for the throne before. We saw this last week. Adonijah, when David's getting old, makes a run at the throne, and Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, does some backdoor politicking and gets Solomon established as king before Adonijah can lock it up. Solomon then goes to Adonijah and says, look, I will let you live as long as you don't step out of line. The moment you step out of line, the moment you do something dumb, the moment you make a bid for the throne again, if you jeopardize me or undermine me in the kingdom, off with your head. Okay. And so Adonijah goes into, solitary retreat, basically. He goes and hangs out under house arrest because he's the closest thing to a threat to the throne. And as we saw in David's time, a threat to the throne is kind of a big deal. And the family heritage is one of turbulence. Solomon's other brother, Absalom, launched a full-scale revolt while David was in charge. So, the idea that Adonijah would start a revolt is perfectly within reason. And so Solomon wants to keep that at bay. So he sends Adonijah away. He sends him into exile, basically, house arrest, whatever you want to say. House arrest, and he goes and hangs out in this little place. One day, Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith, came to see Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Have you come with peaceful intentions? So even Bathsheba is like a little defensive. What's up? Things did not end well between the two of them, I'll tell you that much. Yes, he says, I came in peace. In fact, I have a favor. Okay, what is it? Well, as you know, the kingdom was at one time rightfully mine. All Israel wanted me to be the next king. But the tables were turned, and the kingdom went to my brother, your son, instead. Ha! Well, I guess it's just that's the way God wanted it. So, I got a little favor. Please don't turn me down. It's not a big deal, but I want you to commit to doing it for me. What is it? It's the same exact question, right? What is it? What is it? Because all this is just him flapping his jaws. Speak to King Solomon on my behalf, for I know he'll do anything you request. Ask him to let me marry Abishag, the girl from Shunem. Now, who is this, and why do we care? This is the young, beautiful virgin that was given to King David before David died. And that is a big, big deal. This goes right by Bathsheba. She's like, okay, that's it? All right. You want a girl. Okay, you want to marry a girl. All right. This is more than simply saying, I think she's pretty. She makes me smile. I want to go and marry her. This is totally, completely a political move by Adonijah. You see, when a king dies in that time and place, the process was king dies, new king comes and marries all the old dead kings, takes the harem for himself. He who controls the harem is king. It's kind of how it worked. If you were to go to war and battle and you would take over a kingdom, you would take all the dead king's wives into your harem as a way to solidify your rule. Ladies, shout out to you. Whoever got the ladies, he the man. And everybody knows it. So for Adonijah to make this ploy is actually a quiet maneuvering politically to enhance his claim on the throne by taking for his wife David's most recent wife. Bear in mind, don't get weirded out by all the isn't that his mother-in-law or something? Like it was different back in the day, okay? different in this time and place, different culture, all that sort of stuff. So Bathsheba does not see this on the outset, though. So she goes and she went to King Solomon to speak on Adonijah's behalf. The king rises in his throne to meet her. He bows down before her, and he says, yeah, what's up? I have a small request. Please don't turn me down. Sure, your mom. What's up, Mom? You need something? I got you. Let your brother, Adonijah, marry Abishag, the girl from Shunem. And while this gets past Bathsheba, it does not get past Solomon. Nuh-uh. How can you possibly ask me of this? Right? How can you possibly ask me to give Abishag to Adonijah? King Solomon demands. You might as well ask me to give him the kingdom. You might as well just turn the throne over to him. You know that he's my older brother, and that he has Abiathar, the priest, and Joab, the son of Zeruiah, on his side. Solomon is like, this is a revolt. This is the groundwork for another revolt. And he sees it, to his credit. And so he makes a vow. May the Lord strike me down and kill me if Adonijah has not sealed his fate with this request. Adonijah is going to die this very day. So he sends his assassin to Adonijah and kills him. Kills his brother. Boom. Dunzos. Benaniah becomes his personal hitman. So King Solomon, in killing his own brother Adonijah, kills the fourth sheep or lamb from David. David loses 4 sons, and one of his daughters is raped. Ooh, messy family, guys. I mean, gee willikers. He does end up killing Joab as well. Sends his hitman, Benaniah. Sends Benaniah to do his thing. Benaniah does it. Kills Joab. It's this big dramatic thing. And then at first, he sends for Shmi. Shmi. Oh, gosh. What is that Disney movie? Shmi and Captain Hook. What is the name? Tinkerbell. Peter Pan. Goodness gracious. It took me a while. But I got there. Shmi. The king sent for Shmi. And he says, look, Shmi, you can go on a house arrest. You got to just chill out. But the moment you step out of line, the moment you leave the house, then you're going to die. The day you so much as cross the Kidron Valley, you will die. Your blood will be on your own head. So he kind of makes a compromise. David, his dad, said, you got to kill this guy. And Solomon compromises and says, look, just put him under house arrest. Build a house, live there. Don't leave. Shmi's like, all right, that's fair. Well, guess what? He leaves. Thing happens. Some donkeys run away and all this sort of stuff. And lo and behold, he leaves. So, at the king's command, send the hitman. Sends his hitman. He takes him outside and he kills him. And now the kingdom was firmly in Solomon's grip. So, Solomon, this paragon of virtue, wise and learned ruler, begins his rule steeped in bloodshed. Yeah, let's go to 3. Solomon begins being king just with he solidifies his political stability. He establishes and solidifies military stability. Joab was the previous general, and so there is the backdrop of Joab and Solomon's general, and there's this tension there. So he gets rid of the rival general, and then Abiathar, the priest, who kind of undermined Solomon, he goes into house arrest as well, but at least he stays where he's supposed to. He stays in house arrest forever. So Solomon really clamps down politically, religiously, and does some dirty work. I mean, let's call it what it is. He whacks a couple guys. Like, my goodness. This is like a mob movie. You guys know what I'm talking about? I feel like I'm reading a mob movie. It's like, whoa. But that's the Bible. Gritty, man. Bible is gritty. And yet, even as he does that, even as he establishes and firms up his hold and his grip on the kingdom, there is something hopeful and aspirational that we as the readers and we as listeners anticipate in regards to the life of Solomon. What we begin to see in Solomon is once again another complex character, a character who has pros and cons, great moments, but also very shrewd moments as well. You turn the page and you go to chapter 3, and all of a sudden you begin to see Solomon coming into his own in regards to faith and faithfulness. And so, he is someone that is worth listening to, recognizing. Goodness gracious, if we all just cast the first stone at the first little thing, we'd all be in trouble. Isn't that the truth? So Solomon does begin his reign. Many scholars actually make the case that he's very just in his establishment of his authority. He's just following dad's orders, and actually does give chances and opportunities for life. But, Shmi, good example, leaves and Adonijah makes a run at the throne. And, so in some ways he's justified. At least a lot of scholars take that route. So Solomon then does a couple things. And really what you want to pick up on is that Solomon loved the Lord. He followed all the decrees of his father, David. Okay. Except that he burned some offerings at local places of worship. So this is one of the other big themes that we're going to find with Solomon. Yeah, you didn't get this, Susan, in Sunday school, huh? Yeah, didn't quite get the whole David on his deathbed telling his son Solomon, who ended up writing, as we'll see, a good chunk of the Bible to whack a couple people before David kicks it. Yeah, that didn't quite make it into the flannel graph, right? Yeah. I love it. That's just fabulous, Susan. All right, so Solomon. By the way, a fearless and shameless plug for Susan and Greg, who are going to be helping us lead worship on Sunday at 8 o'clock. So come join us for 8 o'clock traditional service. Thank you, Susan. I'm very excited. Patty was ranting and raving about how awesome you guys are this morning. Yeah, Solomon's, here's where we begin to see like the aspects of his faith and faithfulness. So Solomon's great legacy, that's a great word choice. Solomon's great legacy is that he builds a temple, okay? And not just like any temple, the temple. Solomon builds Solomon's temple. And this is the temple that David always wanted to build. David is the guy who, this goes all the way back to David's chapter where he said, God, I'm going to build you a house. And God's like, psh, I ain't need no house. I'm God. Are you kidding me? You want to build me a house? David, I'll make you a house, buddy. And then he throws him a bone. He's like, look, you have too much blood on your hands. We're going to let your son build the temple, which is somewhat ironic, of course, because as we just discussed, Solomon, it's not like Solomon doesn't have blood on his hands either. But even so, Solomon is permitted and allowed to build the temple. So Solomon, in being faithful, expresses that faithfulness by building this major temple. Before all that stuff happens, though, God actually comes and approaches Solomon in a dream. And God says, look, what do you want? Ask it and I'll give it to you. So God just gives Solomon like a blank check. There's a lot to be said about what could be interpreted here and how we can extrapolate this, but somehow God comes in a vision to Solomon in a dream and begins a conversation with him. And First Kings, the author of First Kings, loves Solomon, by the way. The author of First Kings, the guy who wrote this book, thinks Solomon is the big cheese. I mean, he thinks he's a stud. He's the man. And, it seems to imply that he's worthy of this sort of invitation from God. Okay? It's not every day God just shows up in the Bible and says, hey, ask me for something and I'll give it to you. Solomon replies, you showed great faithful love to your servant and my father David, because he was honest, true, and faithful to you. And that is totally accurate. David was not perfect. He was not clean. He was not, without his faults, but he was honest. He was true, and he was faithful. He made mistakes. He screwed up, but he owned them. He was honest about who he was. He was true in regards to, living a true and real life that was faithful to God. So Solomon sees that. He gets that. You have continued to show this great and faithful love to him today by giving him a son to sit on the throne. So, Solomon's tying even the promise that God made into his own life. Now, O Lord my God, you've made me a king instead of my father David, but I am like a little child who does not know his way around. Good humility. Here I am in the midst of your own chosen people, a nation so great and numerous they cannot be counted. Give me an understanding heart so that I can govern your people well and know the difference between right and wrong. For who is by himself able to govern this great people of yours? This is actually one of those things that if you got your Bible, underline this, circle this, highlight this, and then go get it tattooed. Okay? This is pretty remarkable. This is pretty tremendous, actually. If God comes to you and says, ask me for anything you want, I mean, what would you put on there? How would you respond to that? Right? I would want, health and well-being, or would you want wealth? Would you want, you name it, that raise, that job, that what? Solomon has the humility, and that's why his posturing in the beginning is so very important to recognize. He's got the humility to say, like, God, I'm in and of myself, I am not capable of being a good king. And the evidence is so far that no other king has been able to be a good king either. Nobody has been able to carry the mantle of kingship and governance well. And so I can't in and of myself. I'm not able to do that. I just don't have the capacity. But you, God, have the capacity to give me what I need in order to do that. From your hands, from your bountiful gifts, from your grace, you can give me what I need to govern well. Give me the understanding heart, discernment, wisdom, knowledge, give me what I need to know the difference between right and wrong. Right? So when I'm dealing politically, when I'm dealing with economics, when I'm dealing with policy, help me see what the right and the wrong things are. And then, even to his credit at the very end, he says, who by himself is able to govern this great people of yours? That ultimately it's not about me. It's not about me even being wise and understanding. It's about the well-being of your people. Knowing that your great people are a reflection and testimony to you. That, intrinsic, and we miss this all the time in our Christian frameworks. In Jewish life, you are the living you carry forward the reputation of your God. And being holy and set apart means that, who by himself is able to govern this great people who are the direct reflection of you, your purposes, and your will in this world. So if your people are doing poorly, the rest of the world will look at them and assume that you, God, are doing poorly. And so Solomon gets that his kingship and his ability to rule is a direct reflection on God's own reputation within the nations of the world. You didn't know all that was in there now, did ya? Yeah, there you go. Start writing in the margins of your Bible, all that. But that's what's going on here. I mean, this is cool. This is good stuff. This is like, wow, man. That's legit. unsurprisingly, the Lord is pleased with Solomon and that Solomon asked for wisdom. Here we find that the word change, a shift, that God interprets, the Bible summarizes God's response in the summary of Solomon's statement as just wisdom. Like, what Solomon is asking for and naming here is wisdom. Help me be wise, knowing the difference between right and wrong, carrying forward your reputation, living in such a way as with your people that we reflect your goodness in this world. Because you've asked for wisdom in governing my people with justice and not asked for long life or wealth or death of your enemies, I will give you what you asked for. In fact, I will give you a wise and understanding heart such as no one else ever has or ever will have. On top of that, I'm going to give you what you didn't ask for. Riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. And if you follow me and my decrees. Okay, so he's promising him fame and riches. He's promising him amazing reputation. And then he's also saying, look, if you follow me just like your father did and are faithful, I'll give you a long life as well. So it's pretty cool. His response is to go to worship. He throws a party and he feels really honored. And and then the author actually goes into a detail to show and to prove that God's word comes true, because Solomon starts exhibiting just wisdom, brilliance, understanding, and is able to navigate a bunch of stuff. A simple example is, there's this story here where two women come before him claiming that there's one child, two moms, and both the moms be like, he's mine. And the other mom's like, no, he's mine. And Solomon looks at him and says, cut the baby in half, and you each get half of the baby. And one mom's like, fine. And the other mom's like, no, just give the baby to the other woman. Solomon, in his insight, realizes that the woman who is all right with cutting the baby in half probably ain't the mama. And the real mom is the one who is willing to preserve the life of the child, even if it means giving up the child. So, wow. Yeah, it's pretty legit. He's a smart guy. He figures it out. We get another statement in the following chapter. Here we go. That goes into greater detail even. God gave Solomon great wisdom and understanding, knowledge as vast as the sands on the seashore. In fact, his wisdom exceeded all the wise men of the East and the wise men of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else, including Ethan. We don't know who Ethan is. His fame is spreading, right? He's a brilliant guy. Now, here we go. Here's what counts. He composed some 3,000 proverbs and wrote a whole lot of songs. He could speak with authority about all kinds of plants, from the great cedar of Lebanon to the tiny hyssop that grows from the cracks in the wall. He could also speak about animals, birds, small creatures, and fish. Kings in every nation sent their ambassadors to listen to the wisdom of Solomon. Some of you might have heard, for example, the Queen of Sheba, from Ethiopia. There's a whole story in the Bible about that with Solomon. So, people and dignitaries come to Solomon to see how wise and intelligent he is, and to see the prosperity that the Israelites, the Jewish people, experience under his rule. And they do. He's a really bright guy, and in part of his insight and wisdom is captured and written down. Now, why is that important? If you go to your Bible and you go to this table of contents, you'll notice that, in fact, Solomon is attributed as actually being one of the authors of the Bible. That is to say that he has books in the Bible. Remember, the Bible is a collection of books. It's not just one book. I know it is one book. Like, I get the fact that it's like one book, but inside of this are a bunch of little books. That's what the Bible is. And if you go to the table of contents and you look at all the different books that are listed there, you will find a few of them that are written by Solomon. at least according to history and tradition. For example, Song of Solomon. You ever heard of that? Sometimes referred to as Song of Songs. Song of Songs. It is Egyptian erotic love poetry. Ooh. It's rated R for sure. For those of you who are married and enjoy the joys of marital intimacy, you want to spice some things up, start reading the Song of Solomon to each other. Start talking about climbing the coconut trees and stuff and see where it goes. The Song of Solomon is actually an incredible book that is an allegory. It is a metaphorical. It's trying to capture, for you and for me and for those who would read it, it's trying to capture the level, the intensity, and the intimacy of God's passionate love for his people. That's what it's there for. The Song of Solomon is supposed to be this beautiful level of relational intimacy that captures the same intimacy that is supposed to be present between God and humanity, God and God's people. And that's why it's there. There's a famous rabbi. Which one? I forget which one. One of the famous rabbis. Now I totally look uncredible. But I can't remember which one, so too bad. There is a famous rabbi who is attributed as saying that if you get rid of like all the books in the Bible, keep the Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs, because it is the only one that captures the level of passion, that all the other books can't even come close to capturing the level of passion with which God loves God's people, with the exception of that book alone. You're not even allowed to read that book in the Jewish faith, depending on which branch of Judaism you come from. But like, if you go to more of the Orthodox, more traditional, there are different branches, just like in Christianity, there are different branches. Same is true in Judaism. And depending on which branch, there are a number of branches that will not let you read that book. Like, you're not allowed to. You are not allowed to read that book until you reach a certain age because of its intensity. So, and supposedly, Solomon wrote that book. He's also attributed as writing Proverbs. You guys heard of Proverbs before? Proverbs is one of those books in the Bible that you read and you're like, it'll get you thinking. Proverbs is all about how to live well. And that living well really stems out of a relationship with God. That living well stems from that framework of how to live a godly life. And it's very practical. It's very pragmatic. I mean, it's just like how to be faithful in the daily grind is really what Proverbs is all about. So, I got a question here. Did the Queen of Sheba have a son with Solomon? Found this online. I mean, oh man, there's so many. Joe, good question. The answer is we don't know. That's a common idea. That's a common myth. That's a common idea. Myth. When I use that term myth, I mean like something handed down in terms of story. So what Joe is asking about is that there's a common tradition that says that when the Queen of Sheba came and spent time with Solomon, that they were intimate and that he sends her off with a son pregnant. There's no biblical evidence for it, but it's entirely possible because the biblical evidence that we find with Solomon is that he does like the ladies. There's a reason why he was the author of Song of Solomon. He wrote the Song of Songs. So we don't know. Just to be frank, we don't know. Don't know. He does spend time with her. We know that. She does find him to be a fascinating character. We do know that. She brings a whole bunch of gifts to him and honors tribute to him, and spends time with him. as to their, the thought then is that, like, Solomon has you have to be careful, because the reason I'm a little hemming and hawing is because some people take that same train of thought and believe then, therefore, that the line of David is carried on not through the biblical accordance of where Solomon's line travels, but that it would be carried on through the Queen of Sheba, and then therefore messianic implications are at play. Make sense? So you just got to be a little careful with it, if that makes sense. You don't want somebody coming along saying, yeah, Solomon had a baby with Queen of Sheba, and then therefore the Messiah is supposed to come from the Queen of Sheba and her line. So that's why it gets a little sticky. Yeah, good question though. Yes. There's a bunch of legends about their exchange. What was I talking about? Proverbs, we talked about. Ecclesiastes. Another book of the Bible that is historically, tradition has it given to Solomon is Ecclesiastes. I love Ecclesiastes, guys. It's such a great book. It's a total Debbie Downer. Do you guys ever watch Saturday Night Live? Can I talk about Saturday Night Live on here? I don't know if I can. But there's a funny sketch about Debbie Downer where every time she comes, she's always like, wah, wah, because she's a Debbie Downer. Ecclesiastes is totally like a Debbie Downer, but in the best way possible. When I say it's a Debbie Downer, the reason is because it's intentionally written that way. It is written to cause you, it's kind of like a shock value. It's meant to grab your attention and startle you, and then it holds up a mirror to your life. It's trying to get at where the meaning of life is found. What's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life? And we all, I would like to make the case that many people wonder this question at least once in their life. What's the purpose of life? What's the meaning of life? And Ecclesiastes gets at that. It says, look, you could own everything in the world and you can still be unhappy. You can own nothing in the world and you can still be unhappy. You can have everything going right in life and still not be happy. Where do you derive your meaning and your purpose? And Ecclesiastes makes the case that when you begin to look at the mirror, when you begin to look in the mirror and take a good hard look of what actually brings meaning and purpose into your life, it drives you to see life lived out of a relationship with God. Once again, it talks about finding satisfaction in being the person God created you to be, and that actually is a very simple reality. It is not to complicate it. It is to eat, drink, be merry. It is to find satisfaction in your daily work. It is to live life out faithfully. So Ecclesiastes is just a great book. But the first time you read it, you're like, what the heck was that? It's all meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I mean, it's just fabulous. I love it. It totally is a particular taste, though. So don't just go diving into it. Pastor Andrew said I should read this book. Just don't go diving into it without an open mind. And if you need to have coffee afterwards because you're like, what was that? Just ping me and we'll figure out a time to get together. But all of those books, Song of Solomon, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes, are all attributed to the mind and the heart of Solomon. Yeah, good question, Michelle. Michelle just made a comment. I read where the language of the Song of Songs represents a later form of Hebrew, indicating Solomon was not the author. Folks attributed to him because of his reputation as an extravagant lover of women, because he was a prolific writer of poetry. Your thoughts? Yep, I'm on board with it. Don't freak out. Everybody take a breath. I would describe it as such, that was Solomon the one to actually pen these things with his own hand? I don't know. Does it matter? It's still good stuff. it is still that which God chooses to use as a vehicle to speak into our lives in profound, meaningful, and complex ways. The idea that Solomon himself wasn't the actual author of it, I am okay with that, because for me personally, it does not diminish God's ability and actually God's commitment to speak through it. That said, I find in no way any depreciation, conversely, as well, that Solomon did write it. That Solomon writing it does make sense to me as well. So even if it didn't come from his own hand, perhaps a school or a train of thought that stems from him. I mean, it's very clearly Egyptian poetry. It's stylized in an Egyptian fashion, used with correct Hebrew from a later date. That's where you get complicated, guys, is when you, and Michelle, I so appreciate this. I just love this. I had so much fun with you on the other night where we were talking about these sort of things, right? Where we were talking about, I think it was Sunday, about the complexity of authorship and Hebrew and scholarship and things like that. As we kind of begin to dig into the finer details of grammar and syntax and language. One of the other things that you have to recognize is, as these things are handed down from generation to generation, there is first and foremost oral tradition, but then there's also a written tradition. And in the Jewish life, when certain things were written down is a big question mark. And alongside of when, you get the complexity of, frankly, an editor. And an editor is not a bad thing. We all have editors. I mean, the Bible is edited. That's okay. We have to be okay with the reality of an editor. An editor is an incredibly important role. And any book that gets published with an editor, okay? Unless you self-publish on Amazon. But generally speaking, we have to be okay with, as a biblical people, recognize that faithful, godly men and women have taken with the utmost care, handled these words and stories and scriptures and the truth therein, and God's desire and God's continued ability to speak through them remains perfectly consistent. So really good question. I'm okay with the idea of him not being the exact author like he penned it himself. And yet it's entirely possible that he in no small way contributed to them. In no small way, at the very least, they were stylized in his honor and reflected him and his character. Does that make sense? Is that fair? Can I say it like that? Like, even if he didn't write them, they were attributed. There's a reason why they're attributed to him, and we should respect that tradition in and of itself. Yeah. No, totally, Greg. Yeah, exactly. Makes sense. Yeah. Good. Yeah, he does have wide authorship. I mean, yeah, thank you, Greg. The main thing is the main thing is the main thing. Amen. The main thing here is the main thing. And yeah, really good question, Michelle. Open to it, as long as, to Greg's point, we keep that touch point of the main thing being the main thing. And that is, have you guys read these books? Man, they have the ability to influence, grow, challenge, shape, and shake you up. They are that which God speaks to us through. So they are beautiful books. If I had to make a recommendation, I'd probably start with Proverbs out of those three. If you want to poke around in Proverbs. Just because it's so basic, relevant, how to live life kind of stuff. And it's just so good. It's just so good. Proverbs is good. And it's little bites. It's like little nuggets. Okay. You're not going to be, it's not a story. There's a reason why it's referred to as a proverb. Like, it's little bite-sized things. Sometimes it's like a couple lines or like a chapter. And sometimes it's like literally like one sentence. So Proverbs is kind of a fun one to chew on over a bowl of cereal in the morning with a cup of coffee. Yes, that's exactly right, Michelle. Totally agree. Yes. It doesn't mean that it's false by any means, just complicated and different. That's exactly right. I so appreciated what you said on Sunday, and again here, you're exactly right. I am lockstep with you there. the complexity and the beauty of recognizing the historical significance of the Bible only enhances it for me personally, and makes it that much more beautiful. Though I have to say, it did take me a time to get me there, to wrap my brain around that idea. It's one Susan's point earlier. This is not the stuff, guys, that you're taught in Sunday school growing up, you know. And in a lot of cases, you aren't even taught this sort of stuff on Sunday mornings, or depending on the environment that you come from, the backdrop. It's appropriate for us to get into this kind of like in this sort of setting, right, where we can have conversation a little bit together about it, because we can answer questions and we can navigate it together. In healthy dialogues. So yeah, I so appreciate it. Yes. Awesome, guys. Oh, that was fun. I had a fun. Oh my goodness, it's already 8:30. Hot dang. You guys are so fun. Oh, I don't want to leave you with such a downer then. Well, here's the thing, guys. By the time you get to chapter 11, here's the bummer. I was trying to get through the character of Solomon tonight, so sorry. I gotta just real quick plunge ahead, okay? Yeah, I gotta do it. So here's the deal. By the time you get to chapter 11, Solomon's life gets complicated again. Let me bring it up real quick, and then we'll finish. We'll wrap up, I promise. But we got to get through this character and on to the next. All right, here's the deal. You lovely ladies. Some lovely ladies catch his attention. And Solomon, for as faithful of a man as he is to God, ends up chasing down women. Not good. He needed some of you faithful ladies that are on tonight to come and just whack him upside the head. Say, "What you doing, Solomon?" He ends up going and chasing some women from other areas, other countries, and when you embrace them, so also comes their gods. Here's the deal. The Lord had clearly instructed the people of Israel, don't marry them. This is going all the way back, guys, to when we talked about Joshua. Do you guys remember this? And the conquering of the land and the indigenous people with their indigenous gods and cultures and all that sort of stuff. Not good. Why? Because if you marry them, they're going to turn your hearts to their gods. You're gonna love them. You're gonna fall in love with them and enjoy their company, and they're gonna ask you to do things like join them for their church instead of you having, and that's exactly what happens. Solomon insisted on loving them anyways. He ends up having 700 wives, woo, and 300 concubines. Very frankly, Solomon increases and gains political advantages over his surrounding allies and countries in the near Middle East through marriage. He's not David. He doesn't lead armies. He's political and he's wise. And so in order to secure a trade with a country, he'd say, "Fine, I'll trade with you. Let's seal the deal. Give me a wife." And so that's how he would expand the territory and keep ancient Israel healthy and the coffers a-flowing, was through marriage. He used political, specifically marriage, to manage his kingdom. And this was stupid. This was a bad move on his part. This was not wise. Why? Because they end up turning his age. In his old age, they turned his heart to worship other gods instead of being completely faithful to his father David. Solomon ends up worshiping a bunch of other gods, including, this is what really stinks. He ends up worshiping Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. Not cool. Anytime you see Molech, think child sacrifice. Yep. Let that sink in. 3, 2, 1. Good. Molech was a religion held, and part of their practice was child sacrifice. In this way, Solomon did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He refused to follow the Lord completely as his father had done. And this costs him. This is bad. He goes so far. Look at this. On the Mount of Olives. You ever heard that before? The Mount of Olives? Something about Jesus. On the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. He even built a pagan shrine. Oh my gosh. For Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab. and another from Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. The Moabites and the Ammonites trace their lineage back to Lot. If you remember Abraham's nephew Lot, Abraham's nephew Lot has an incestuous relationship with his own two daughters. It's messy. And as a result, you get the Moabites and the Ammonites. So the Bible does not think highly of these people. These people are incestuous sons of fill in the blank. Okay? That's really, truly what the Bible is trying to tell you here. They're making a very specific commentary, and they tie that very intentionally, in large part because of this refrain, detestable God and detestable God, that the Moabites and the Ammonites had vile and evil practices associated with their religion. Solomon built such shrines for all his foreign wives, using them to burn incense and sacrificing to other gods. The Lord was very angry with Solomon, for he had turned the Lord away. God appeared to him twice. He warned Solomon about this. Solomon doesn't do it anyways, right? So here's the deal. He says, I am going to take the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your servants. But for the sake of your father David, I will not do this while you're still alive. I will take the kingdom away from your son. Boom. So that's what happens. Solomon starts off kind of hot and heavy, doing well. And then as he gets older, his faithfulness starts to slip. And not so hot in the end. It's a major, major bummer. He does do a lot of wonderful things throughout his life. He does build the temple. You can see it there at top left. That's an outline of the historical temple, and it is really quite a significant deal. We can talk more about it next week. You'll notice there's a person down here on the bottom side carrying a brick, and that is because the medium that Solomon used to build that temple was slave labor. This will go into what we explore next week as the kingdom's fractures. The kingdom splits in two. Little surprise here. The people who were the slaves, the Israelites, anyways, we'll get into it next week. And then in the bottom right here, you see little idols and representation of women. That's to represent the wives of Solomon. So it's a major bummer. Solomon ends up slipping in his faithfulness. He is a complex character like us all. So hate to finish on the bummer note, but that's what I got for you tonight. It is already past 8:30. Forgive me for going 8 minutes over. Hot dang. We'll pick up next week. Pick it up with really the fall of the kingdom. And that's basically what the rest of the book of Kings is. It is what happens to the kingdom as it falls apart. Oh, isn't that cool? Hey, thanks for joining tonight. As always, guys, it's a blast hanging out with you. Thanks for being part of the online community that we have as Christ Church. It is just a fabulous joy to spend time with you on Tuesday nights. I really have a lot of fun doing this with you. And yeah, thanks for being a part of it. So, hey, as always, join us Sunday mornings, strapped, having fun with that, looking at godly money and godly perspectives on money. Pastor Bob's up again this coming week. You got me coming up hot and heavy after that, still talking about money. So 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10:30. And as always, we're a church for those who aren't here yet. So tag somebody, send them a link, pick them up for coffee beforehand, and then take them to church. Get them all to church so that we can continue to lift more lives and elevate Christ in more and more lives. Join me Thursday morning if you're interested. We got Thursday morning meditation, totally different vibe, totally different jam. It is meditation, it is scripture reading, it is prayer, and Holy Spirit shout outs at that. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks, guys, for always having fun with me and enjoying it. Appreciate it. It is so good to have you tonight. Yeah, thanks for being here, guys. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and we will see and talk to you all soon. Can't wait to see you. Go lift some lives, elevate Christ, and be a church for those who aren't here yet. God bless.